The ANC responded there to a number of questions, chiefs among those being the question of the budget. It was asked by journalists in the room how it intends on having the budget passed, given that the DA, the Democratic Alliance, had made an ultimatum to the ANC. The ultimatum being that they will not vote for a VAT increase, a budget that at least has a VAT increase. And if the ANC seeks to gain support for the budget outside of the Government of National Unity partnerships, that is to say, if the ANC seeks the support of the EFF as well as the MK party and wins that support, that the DA will consider the relationship as having severed. That question was put to the ANC, and their response to it was that they'll engage all political parties, as is the nature of a parliamentary process. But two things having said there towards the end of NEC member Parkstow's address there, two things that they had cautioned against. One, that you can't negotiate the budget and or the coalition through the media, and they strongly caution against that, of course, in response to the Democratic Alliance's approach towards certain engagements, which happened primarily, seemingly, according to the ANC, through the media. And the second thing Parkstow raises is the risk of parties making an objection towards budget and revenue instruments like the value-added tax hike of 0.5%, but are willing to make a concession on it based on other political trade-offs. The ANC spokesperson there closing it off, saying that you have to focus on the budget without trying to reconstruct the South African law and the South African constitution. That is to say, trying to let go of redress and transformation policies in order to vote for the budget is something that they are vehemently against. Those were some of the questions having been answered there on the issue of the economy. They also responded to the issue of international balance of forces. There, NEC member Kgonsentsho Ramokgopa had responded to the questions around the ANC potentially facing targeted sanctions from the United States. Journalists in the room asked the question, and the response there was that the ANC does not want to prescribe foreign policy to position to any nation state, and that it leaves it up to them. But the ANC will continue, he says, to invest in the preservation of the relationship of South Africa and the United States of America, and that they will not be participating in what he terms megaphone diplomacy. And then just lastly and importantly, a question was put to the ANC there, the NEC response there on the National Union of Mine Workers, having said that they're having resolved rather that they would support the South African Communist Party in the upcoming elections instead of the ANC. And the response there to the journalist was that the NEC is engaged in a discussion about the reconfiguration of the alliance, and that's an ongoing engagement, that they will not be responding to it prematurely and at the end of this, at this stage in particular. And very importantly, with the budget vote happening, the ANC responded and said that they completely support the budget that was tabled by Minister Enoch Godongwana. And the reason they cited the support for it is because they deem it to be a pro-poor budget. That is to say, as they cite, 61 cents of every R1 in the expenditure line items of the budget goes towards the social wage. Things like education, healthcare and social welfare support is where that 61 cents goes, amongst other things. Secondly, and additionally there, they support the expansion of the zero-rated VAT basket, making sure that, they say, it cushions the poorest of the poor from the VAT hike, making sure that they're able to still continue to afford essentials, and that the list of essentials will be expanded and extended. They support that too, and they support the 1 trillion rand medium-term infrastructure budget spend of 1 trillion rand. You would recall that was announced by the Minister of Finance in the budget speech a few weeks ago. Importantly, they say that is an indication, and this was raised by NEC member Kgonsentsho Ramokgopa, that is an indication of a commitment towards fixed capital expenditure on investment. He says the target ought to be around 30%, but South Africa only hovers at around 14%, and that it needs to be ramped up. And that 1 trillion rand is an indication towards that. But we're now joined by SABC News reporter Kenny Mapanga, who's joining us live there from the NEC meeting in Boksburg. Kenny sets through that NEC feedback press media briefing in a very short while, a short moment ago rather. Kenny, thank you so much for joining us. A lot coming out of there, and it was quite a lengthy report, but it took a while for them to get to answer the question around the trade-off with the trade-off in the budget and the Democratic Alliance. The answer wasn't quite clear in the first round, but in the second round, when you reframed your question there and asked whether or not what the position of the ANC is with regards to the Democratic Alliance ultimatum, that if they seek support from the EFF and or the MK parties outside of the government of national unity, that they would walk away. It was quite a tense question for them to answer. It seems like they were trying to evade it as best as possible, but the answer eventually came through. How does that tie in with what you've been hearing throughout the engagement?
Indeed, good afternoon to you, Oliver, and to the viewers at home. It shows us that they are apparently at a sensitive stage in these negotiations to have this budget passed, or at least get it over the line. We have no clear indication yet as to whether there has been engagements with the DA post this position that they're taking, stating that if the ANC continues with this budget, or rather gets assistance from the opposition to support or back this budget, then that could threaten the stability of the GNU. It's the ANC's position that that is not the case. However, we're not getting a definitive answer at this stage as to how this budget will be passed. It's quite clear that the ANC is remaining firm on the budget as it is tabled now, with the contested proposed VAT increase remaining there, that they'll be heading to Parliament on Tuesday or Wednesday rather, with that same budget, not heeding to these what they framed as political demands by the Democratic Alliance to scrap those transformative laws, that is the Expropriation Act, NHI, Bela Act, in exchange for support of this particular budget. But to elaborate further and get a little bit more clarity, as I'm sure the nation is also just as lost as the negotiations continue about this budget impasse, the ANC still remaining quite confident. Mahlengi Bhengu-Motsiri, that's the ANC national spokesperson, joining us again now to elaborate further, but still not committing to tell us how. Where do you source this confidence that this budget will make it over the line next week?
I'd like to think that political parties that are represented in Parliament understand the burden of responsibility they have to serve the national interest. And part of that means some concessions have got to be made within the realm of the national budget. We can't be reversing what has been achieved in South Africa by way of laws that address inequality in our society. And that is not part of a budget conversation. And demands by the DA that pertain to policy changes, demands by the DA that pertains to foreign policy of the country, are demands that should be raised elsewhere. Let's talk about the budget. Let's look at the budget proposal. Let's look at it in totality. Let's look at the expenditure side of things and the revenue side of things. On the expenditure side of things, let's look at the social wage bill that is being covered, is being addressed, from the child grant system, in fact the entire grant system, to access to basic health care, access to education. All of those things that are being done were introduced by the ANC in government in South Africa to ensure that inequality does not deny people, particularly young people, from accessing opportunity. So we're not going to entertain those kinds of policies using this particular conversation. We are confident because we believe that the culture of negotiation is something that we are well versed with as the ANC, having led the process of democratic transition into a new South Africa. We have that capacity of bringing people together, which is why we established the Government of National Unity in any case.
Is the expectation of a compromise from the ANC only on the DA? What has the ANC put forward to reach a common ground, or maybe get past this deadlock that you're reaching with the DA? Have you put anything forward to say that this is where we can compromise as well for us to reach a common ground? We've already understood the position you've taken regarding the political demands that they've made. However, the budget still needs to be passed. So if the DA is still in these negotiations, is there anything that the ANC has done to appease its GNU partner with regards to this contestation?
Remember that this conversation that's taking place now started way back before the first attempt at introducing the appropriation bill, and wherein even before then, Cabinet as a whole, including the DA that has members who serve in Cabinet, discussed these proposals. So this is the second iteration of that process. And then you saw revisions to what the ANC would have proposed had the first sitting taken place. So you can see that there was a huge attempt at securing the household income and protecting that, especially for the poor and the working class families. The 0.5% is costed on the basis of the need to generate more revenue in order to finance all of these things that we are doing. What also is getting missed in the conversation is the fact that there's a huge spending that is going into infrastructure development, which has a huge job creation potential as a multiplier of those investments. So I think we need to take all of those things into account.
Well, there you have it. The ANC remaining firm on its position that they will not retreat on this budget with the contested proposed VAT increase. They'll be heading to Parliament next week with that same budget. However, what remains now is as to, following negotiations, who will support the ANC in getting this budget over the line. The ANC NEC will continue to sit until Monday, and hopefully then the nation would have an answer as to how they'll get over this deadlock.